Give you my heart.
Hey, what's up, you guys? My name's Alan.
My name's Cassandra.
And welcome back to AJ and KTV. So today what we're going to do is we're going to do a wrestling video, and it's going to be on 90s women's wrestling.
So the best women's wrestlers of the 90s.
Yeah.
So it's going to be our top 10 list of the greatest women. So
It's just like, let's just talk a little bit about women's wrestling in the 90s and how they were portrayed of women's wrestling in the 90s. It was terrible. Like, it was literally like they did not give a damn about women's wrestling in the 90s.
it was mostly just a sex symbol, and that's why, like, when you look at the ruthless aggression era, you look at the attitude era, the women aren't really portrayed as wrestlers. So I'm glad that the revolutionary era happened around the 2010s to now.
Because, like, really, when you watch, like, because, like, I personally do like the Attitude Era and, like, the eras before that, but it's, like, just watching how they portrayed women is just not good. Like, that's just really bad.
Well, in the early 90s, they portrayed women properly.
Yeah,
they weren't
of course.
sex symbols or nothing. But in the 95 to on, it was more sexualized, the women.
Like, a lot of people we're going to talk about in this list because that's just the way it was back then.
So you want to start? Or?
Yeah, sure. So basically, number 10 on our list of best of the 90s is a woman named Bertha Faye. So Bertha Faye was a wrestler, and she wrestled in Japan under a Monster Ripper in 1987. She's also a Canadian wrestler who began working in Stampede Wrestling, where she became the first women's champion. In 1995, she debuted in WWF and won her first ever WWF Women's Championship from Alundra Blayze, who we'll talk about later. But the problem with her career is that it was cut short in 2001 when she sadly passed away at the age of 40. So, yeah, that's a sad way to end your
Honestly, I've never seen any of her work.
Neither have I.
But she goes down as one of the top women's of the 90s, so that's one of them. So number 9 would be Debra Marshall. So she debuted for WCW as a valet called Queen Debra in 1995 to 1998. She debuted in the WWF in 1998. She started in 1995 valeting her first husband, Steve Mongo Michael, in WCW. In 1998, she managed the tag team Jeff Jarrett and Owen Hart, where she won her first WWF championship off of Sable in 1999, and married Stone Cold Steve Austin and was a major part of the Alliance as his side.
Wife. Not side, his wife.
By
his side.
By his side.
That's better.
She was one of the first women, other than Sunny, which we're going to talk about later on. But she was one of the top ladies that basically started
The sex.
as divas.
Yeah, like the sex part of wrestling. Which, I mean, is like, yeah, sure, I know, like, we don't want to put that in, but it's just, like, it's a big part of the 90s, so, like, it has to be mentioned as, like, the woman of that generation. That's what they were. So, yeah, so number 8, she is personally a really good wrestler, in my opinion, and it is Luna Vachon. She had a 22-year career and wrestled for WWF, ECW, and AWA, and also WCW. She was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2009, and she's been inducted
2019.
Oh shit, 2019?
Yes.
I can't read. And also many more Hall of Fames in different promotions. But sadly, she died in 2010 at the age of 47, I think it was, right?
Yes, and she was also a big part of the 90s when she was part of the Misfits, right?
Yeah, she was part of the Misfits. She was also part of the legendary Vachon family, who I think is Maurice Mad Dog Vachon.
I think so. I think that was her dad.
I'm not sure about that. We didn't do our full research on that, but I know she was part of that family, and they were really famous wrestlers in the 80s and 90s and stuff.
So number 6 on our list is
7.
Sable. Oh, number 7?
You're skipping people, Cassandra. God damn.
So number 7 on our list is Bull Nakano. She is a Japanese
She's
pro
so
wrestler
disrespectful, guys.
and golfer. She began in All Japan Women's Wrestling and became an AJW as a teenager. She held several AJW singles and tag championships. So that's pretty good, I think, in my opinion. She then became the first CMLL World Women's Champion in Mexico. And in 1994, she made her WWF debut and feuded with Alundra Blayze, which we're going to be talking about later on, and held the WWF Women's Championship once. She also wrestled for WCW in 1998. She was really, like, if you look back at the 90s, known as one of Alundra Blayze's, like, biggest feuds, I think, when she was back in WWF.
Yeah.
I know, didn't she feud with Bertha Faye as well?
I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure that she was a big part of the early 90s wrestling scene. So yeah, that's pretty much all about her. So the next person is well, we all know her if you're a wrestling fan. That famous scene with Jerry Lawler in the paint. If you and it's Sable. And she debuted in 1996, became the second WWF Women's Champion from 1989 to 1998. I can't read. I swear, I can't read. 1999, she managed Mark Marrow, and in 1996 to 1998, also later in her career, she was a Playboy model.
And for those who don't know, she's married to Brock Lesnar.
And basically, like, all I can really say about her, she was the person that really made all women in the 90s like fully sexualized, and like she was like but yeah, that's basically Sable. She was one of the better ones of the 90s, so that's saying something.
Better. So number 5 is Jacqueline. And she was like one of the women, well, there was a lot of women that weren't good wrestlers, but in my opinion, I feel Jacqueline was one of the better wrestlers in the 90s.
See, the thing is with this list, we have to like kind of like go with good wrestlers, but like people that made an impact. So like, say like someone like Luna was a very good wrestler, but you didn't know about her. Like you didn't didn't make a huge impact in the wrestling business.
So this is Jacqueline. So she wrestled during the Attitude Era from 1998 to 2004. So in WWF, she made her debut in 1998. She also wrestled from 1997 to 1998 in WCW, and she was a 14-time USWA Women's Champion. 14-time Women's Champion in another promotion.
Still didn't beat Ric Flair.
She managed to manage in WCW Harlem Heat. She was the first manager of Harlem Heat. And she held the Women's Championship twice in WWE and was a very strong woman. And she basically was like, well, Chyna was the first person to do this, but she was one of the other women to face men, and she was actually the first woman to win the Cruiserweight Championship.
Yeah, that's definitely a good accomplishment. Winning a men's title, like that's definitely a big accomplishment, no matter how like big or small you are. So number 4 is another sex symbol, but she made a huge impact as the first WWF women's like diva or whatever.
So she was established as the first sexual diva.
She's also the most downloaded poster or something of all time or something like that. She has a lot of accomplishments, but none of them have to do with wrestling.
She was literally just a valet manager, and then she ended up being in the WWE Hall of Fame.
But she made a huge impact, so we have to talk about her. And this is Sunny. Sunny debuted in wrestling in 1992 in Smoky Mountain Wrestling till 1995, and then debuted in the WWF in 1995?
Yes, she debuted.
I thought she was way before then.
No.
Wow, I literally didn't know that. In 1995, and she is considered, like I said, the first diva. She was known as being a manager, valet, ring announcer, and she also appeared in ECW from 1998 to 1999, and WCW in the 2000s. She was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2011. And she won 2 Slammy Awards. Those are literally her only accomplishments.
So when you think about Sunny, I mean, she was a good manager. She was a great heel. Like,
This is no like shit talking to her. She was great at the time, but like you can tell in our voice, we just don't like the fact that like she portrayed like every woman like on were portrayed as like Sunny. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
basically you had to be blonde, you had to be pretty, like you had to be this and that. It's like you couldn't be just yourself and just be a good wrestler. You had to be this, or then you wouldn't make it.
so the next one that actually made a huge impact in the women's industry in the 90s was Sherri Martel, aka Sensational Sherri. So she worked for AWA in 1980s and held the AWA Women's Championship 3 times.
I'm not gonna lie, I barely even knew that she wrestled. I thought she was just a manager. But yeah.
She then joined WWF and held the Women's Championship as well. So she was the WWF Women's Champion. She managed the likes of Randy Macho Man Savage, after the likes of Miss Elizabeth, Ted DiBiase, and the most famous one, Shawn Michaels. And then she also had a small appearance in 2005 when Shawn Michaels had a rivalry with Kurt Angle.
Yeah, I remember that.
Sadly, she died in 2007. But then she also has accolades of being in
Accolades,
ECW,
Cassandra.
appeared in ECW and WCW and acted as the second manager of Harlem Heat. So not only did Harlem Heat have one manager, they had 2.
Harlem Heat was just... They were a good tag team, but like they just had a lot of managers.
Like I said, she
Do you
sadly...
know who Harlem Heat is?
Yes,
Right?
is Booker T and his brother.
Okay, good. At least you know that.
Sadly, she died in 2007, but before she died in 2007, she appeared as a manager in TNA for Bobby Roode, and she was also inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2006.
At least she got immortalized before she passed away, so that's a good thing at least. Because I feel like, because there's some other wrestlers that never get immortalized before they pass away, and it's just like, it just feels like shit, because like they would have been able to actually have that moment.
That's true.
So at least she got that before she passed away. So the number 2 is, now we're getting to like the women that like are really good wrestlers. Now it's not like sexual, it's nothing. So basically, her name is Alundra Blayze, and her WCW name was Medusa.
She was known on the indies as Medusa.
Yeah. So basically, she is known for dropping the WWF Women's Championship belt in the trash live episode of what, Nitro, I think it was?
It was WCW.
Yeah, WCW TV. She dropped the WWF Women's title into the trash.
Now think about it. When you wrestle for a championship, that is a prized possession.
Those titles are worth money.
And it means everything. So when you're a wrestler, you wrestle for gold. And that's the highest tier for a woman. So the women's championship was the highest tier for women. And she didn't care. She wrestled for WWF
It was just
for
to
a
make
couple
it
years.
was to make a statement, basically. She really started, like, people say like, oh, Kevin Nash and like them started, but really it was her that started the wars, because
Yeah.
that was unheard of at the time.
Yeah.
Going on another person's like show and dropping a title into a trash,
And then joining
like
their
a trash
promotion.
can. Yeah, that's just like unheard of. But now let's go into her accolades and accomplishments. So she debuted in the 80s, right?
She debuted in the 80s, but really got noticed in the 90s.
Yeah, in the 90s, and then returned to WCW. Yeah, okay. And then her main feuds were with Bull Nankano, who we talked about earlier, and with Bertha Faye, who we also talked about earlier. And she became the women's champion 3 times, and she was a WCW women's champion. She also had a school, right?
Yeah, so she also had the legs to train Torrie Wilson, Stacy Keibler, and Molly Holly. some of the Ruthless Aggression era
stars.
stars. Yeah.
And she's also inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2015. So she was also immortalized as one of the best.
And she's made her appearances in WWE over the years, like in Women's Royal Rumbles and like certain like shows and stuff. So
like
she's still close
celebrations
to
and stuff.
So she's still...
Personally, if I was WWE, I wouldn't brought her back after that because like that's just disrespect. But I mean, money's money. So I mean,
it was the wars. People did what they had to do for TV.
That's true. So.
The last person that we're going to be talking about is a woman that actually immortalized the 90s women's wrestling.
Like, personally, we weren't alive in the 90s, so we didn't watch her. But, like, watching her back, seeing her fight, like, men, and freaking, like, being, like, the strong woman that did not give a shit, being strong, being, like, fearless. She was the best wrestler, women's wrestler of the 90s by far.
So who we're talking about, if you don't know, is Chyna. She was a huge part of the 90s. She debuted alongside Triple H in 1997 as the ninth wonder of the world, Chyna, in DX, and she was the only woman in that faction. And she actually played a huge part in the Monday Night Wars.
So she was the only woman until the woman Torrie came into it.
So in DX, as the ninth wonder of the world, she held the Intercontinental Championship. She is the first woman to hold the Intercontinental Championship.
Like, imagine a woman holding, like, I know, like, a cruiserweight title.
And it's not she didn't hold it just once. She held it, like, a couple times, no?
Yeah, and she beat, like, some of the top guys, like Eddie Guerrero. She beat Chris Jericho.
Jeff Jarrett.
She beat all those guys, and it's just like, okay, I could see her beating, like, people like jobbers, you know what I mean? Like, that's what they would usually do, but no, she beat, like, main eventers and people that are considered the best of all time.
So she held the Intercontinental Championship twice, and also she held the WWF Women's Championship once. She was also the first ever woman to compete for a number one contender match for the WWF Championship. Now, that's huge. Now, you can be a woman and wrestle and be the top of your division. But when you go and start wrestling the top men's division for the WWF Championship...
That's just unheard of.
That's just amazing. And not only, she also was the first ever woman to wrestle in a Royal Rumble match. Now, I know that now the women's have their own Royal Rumble match.
But
at that time, she was the first ever woman to actually wrestle in a Royal Rumble. So that was the craziest. And then there was the likes of Beth Phoenix, Karma, and then eventually we had our own Royal Rumble.
But like the thing that I do that, the way I think of that is that it's just like, I feel like they did it because like those women were like big burly women. So like they just did it because, oh well, we don't want Chyna to be the only one, because at the end of her career something happened where like Chyna, they weren't in the best books with her.
The thing is that what other women didn't do was wrestle in a King of the Ring tournament as well, which Chyna did. Yeah. She also faced the likes of Triple H, Kurt Angle, and other wrestlers like Chris Jericho, which we already said, which are considered one of the greatest wrestlers of all time in the WWE. Sadly, she left in 2001, and in 2016 she passed away. But in 2019, she finally got inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame for being in the faction DX. Which, I mean, I wish she would get inducted for being herself, because she was such an amazing women's wrestler. Mm-hmm. But the fact that she was even acknowledged and put into the WWE Hall of Fame is still okay.
I personally think that the reason why, and like another thing that's kind of a shame, is that she didn't even win that many women's championships. Like, I know she was fighting men at the time, but it's just like, for someone that dominant to fight men, she should have easily won at least 2 or 3 or 4 women's championships. Like, the fact that she only won like 1, it just doesn't make sense to me, honestly.
But honestly, those were the top 10 women of the 90s.
I know we talked some shit about like some of the top ones, but it's just because we personally don't agree with the way wrestling, like women's wrestling, was handled back then. But we still have to respect the impact that they made.
So the next video that we're going to be doing next Friday is the top 10 90s men's wrestlers.
Oh, we're doing the 90s men?
Yes.
Oh shit, okay. I didn't know that.
So comment down below to see which ones you guys think are going to be in the top 10.
If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And yeah, please turn on the bell button so you never miss a video. And yeah, see you guys next week.
Bye.